go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another outstanding episode of ARG Presents. I'm Amigo Aaron, joined by a man who, much like Pinball 2000, had a peak around 1999 and then faded into obscurity. The Brent.
I peaked far before that. Also, outstanding. You've got all these pinball terms, and that's what you go with?
The last time we had a pinball show, I said, "Pintastic," and you mocked me. So this time, I went totally generic.
And I'm still mocking you.
That's right. So, if you joined us last week, we spun the wheel. We made the deal. And this week, we took a look at pinball machines from the late 90s.
Yes.
Now,
would you say this was the peak of pinball?
Absolutely not.
Oh.
I will say that it was not the peak of pinball, and I'll tell you why. When doing research for this show, as I nosed around to try to determine which table I wanted to do, it occurred to me that all the great tables came out in the early 90s, and that's a fact, and you can look it up.
It's right in that mid.
Everything from 95 back, that was quality stuff. Everything from 95 forward, you're getting into some iffy territory, which comes into play with the history look that we're going to take here in a minute.
Sure.
So, since you seem more high on the pinball of the late 90s than I am, what do you recall about that era?
No, I'll say it really was more the mid 90s. It was the 93, 94, 95 that pinball was just
correct
on incredible fire.
Yes.
So, although my machine came out in 95, yours came out far, far later than that, right?
Yeah, because it's the late 90s.
Yeah.
It wasn't the mid 90s. It was the late 90s.
99?
It was 99. Yes,
99?
That's right. I recall that pinball was riding a pretty good high into the late 90s because they had such a major boom period of pinball machines. It's funny, though, when I look through the list of what I could play, and I kid you not, I didn't see much that I was into. I almost picked Twister. Believe it or not, Sega's pinball machine dedicated to the film, the license.
Yeah, it's a great pick.
I don't know if people liked Twister the film. I thought it was okay.
It was okay.
I saw it in the theater. I thought it was wacky. Lots of crazy effects. Bill Paxton, But the pinball machine was great.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever mentioned this before, but I used to play it in this hot arcade. We had an arcade near my house, and you could go in there and drink and smoke and do whatever you wanted.
It was an old-time arcade.
You'd be in there, and it was hot in there because you had all these machines, unlike in here, which is freezing cold today in here. But you'd have this machine, and you would be dying. You'd be melting you'd be dying on the vine. And Twister, if you activated this certain mode, a giant fan that was mounted on top of the back glass on the backboard would turn on. It was so nice.
Yeah.
It was so cool. I thought, man, this is a brilliant plan to put this fan on there. But I mean, I wouldn't call Twister. And Twister's I really actually like Twister. It's one of my more favorite pinball machines, but it's not like an all-time classic. I mean, people aren't clamoring for Twister, and so what was around in the late 90s to choose from amongst those? You got your Twister. You've got like South Park, which I was never a fan of.
It's still a good pinball machine, though.
I don't think it's that good. I don't like it.
If you take the theming out, it is.
If you take the theming out, you've got nothing. You got a chunk of wood. I didn't like it. You had a lot of licensing. It's just stuff.
Star Trek,
right? No, Star Trek was in the early 90s.
94.
That's your two. It was out of the loop here. So you had most of your pinball machines that came out after 95 were just. I mean, you could see why the market had dipped.
There was a different Star Trek pinball, not Next Generation.
That was after the 90s.
Yeah,
Trust me, I looked all this stuff up. I looked at a huge list. The truth of it all is pinball peaked right around the mid 90s, and then it went through a decline. And so what was to be done? And this will dovetail nicely into our look this week into the past. So Williams had been a powerhouse, a juggernaut of pinball for many, many years. And they had gobbled up some of their competition along the way. They had amongst them Bally was one. They had basically like taken over a lot of stuff, and so you had this big pinball maker in that time where pinball was doing real well for a while.
Yeah.
Williams came around in '74, which I thought was later than I would have guessed. I thought it was interesting. And Williams, they eventually changed their name to WMS Industries, and had been one of the real staples of pinball.
Yeah.
You had Gottlieb, you had Williams, and Bally. And then later on, some newcomers came into the mix. You had your Sega, for example. Even Atari made some pinball machines there for a while. Data East. But Williams was always there. Of course, Williams also had a strong tradition of arcade machines. Well, Williams in the mid-90s had invested in and began manufacturing slot machines. All right?
Yep.
And an odd thing happened. Slot machines started to take off. And pinball declined.
Yep.
And keep in mind, these Williams was like the Cadillac. We've got some Williams back here. They were the Cadillac of pinball machines. They were real popular. So what's to be done? Well, the guys at Williams got together and they had a meeting. And if you're familiar with pinball at all, you'll know two games. One is Granny and the Gators, and the other one is Baby Pac-Man. These are two games that try to integrate a video screen into the pinball machine.
And this was when video games were really taking off.
And so what you had here was a half of a pinball machine and then half of a video game.
Yes.
Right? And the result was less than fabulous. I mean, I don't know anyone that says, like, Baby Pac-Man's my favorite machine. Now, we sort of have a soft spot for it, but it's not. The pinball part of it's not that good, and the video game part's not that good. Now, but it's
an oddity.
There's some integration, but it's not great. Now, we actually have behind us here Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, the pinball machine, which is a way better machine than Baby Pac, and it's a much older machine too. So when they got together at Williams to see what they were going to do to try to get their pinball machines up and running, they had come up with a concept of a machine that's almost set on like two skis. That's what it looks like. It's a real futuristic design with a pinball cabinet and a big screen in the background. Now, this was not the first time this has been thought up, but and in fact, pinball has sort of went in that. They've taken that direction. If you look at your Wizard of Oz and some of the newer machines from Jersey Jack. They have integrated a full video screen in the background of pinball. So effectively, what Williams was proposing at the time was what was actually the direction pinball went, for better or for worse.
Right, and the rail system was to make it easier to operate for operators to go in and pull out the rails and change out what they need. But I believe they were also trying to make those interchangeable, right?
They had a bunch of crazy notions. But, you know, the thing about it is, pinball purists, and there are plenty. And one thing you'll learn is that pinball machine people are often totally separate from video game people. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying everyone is. There's plenty of people that like them both, like us. But pinball has its own crowd. And what they don't want is video games in their pinball.
They don't, yeah.
They don't like it.
They're often an older crowd because pinball was around way before video games.
And you can see our previous publish over the history of pinball.
Yeah.
But when they had this meeting, they said, "Listen, for those of you that aren't on board with this, I mean, raise your hand." A few guys raised your hand. George Gomez, a couple other guys. And said, "Listen, I don't like this direction." They're like, "Listen, if you don't come up with something else, then don't complain because this is where we're going. We got to do something, or we're going to be sunk." Because Williams Corporate was thinking about, chopping the pinball division, because what had ended up happening was the slot machine business had gone so well that the pinball machine side was actually, and they were losing money. They were actually bringing down the value of the company.
Yeah.
Without them, the value would have went up.
Yeah. Plus, they were taking up warehouse space and development space, and all that factored in.
Right. So Gomez and a couple guys went back, and they sat around trying to come up with something. And sure enough, a bunch of them were at an arcade playing a Deluxe Galaga machine. You probably haven't even heard this.
Yeah.
And so, And so, if you've ever played Deluxe Galaga, it runs on, and there are a few machines that do this. It has a gimmick where basically the screen's in the top of it, there's a mirror, and it basically projects video game graphics on a cardboard background, and it gives it depth.
Yeah.
In the case of asteroids, it's like an asteroid field, and but it's just a picture of one, and they put it was a cool effect.
Yes.
It's been done in video games all the way back to the mechanical days.
Yes.
It's
an optical illusion.
That's right. And so they were like, wait a minute, we think we might be able to do something in this. So they went back they tried to explain this to people, and the people couldn't understand what they were saying. So they're like, we're going to build a prototype. And they went back and cobbled a prototype together, and get this, here's the great connection. One of the things they used for the video components of this cobbled together hollow pin was an Amiga. They actually had an old Amiga, then they pulled it out, and they hooked the Amiga up to get the graphics for this original attempt. And they built a small game, right? And they took it to Williams, and what this thing did was, picture, if you haven't seen one of these, and I'll have a picture of it, picture a pinball machine with basically the back end section with a hood over it, like almost like a little tunnel that comes over the top section. In the top of this tunnel, or in the tunnel is a monitor and a mirror, and it reflects video down on the reflective surface of the pinball glass. And what you get is the optical illusion that there are video elements on the pinball field or near it.
For example, you can animate, say you go through a virtual spinner, or the actual field will have a spinner that you go through, but the projection will have a virtual spinner that spins, and score values will look like they're leaping off of the spinner. Which is a real neat effect that all the Pinball 2000s had.
What they did was quite clever, because what you could do is introduce video elements that could interact with the ball.
Yeah.
So you would have bad guys on the play field, and you could shoot the ball and hit them. And since they knew the position these aliens would be when they designed the pinball machine, they could have rollovers and whatnot, or flippers, or anywhere, something, or not flippers, but like anything that you could hit that the machine would know was a hit. It would blow the alien up in video. It was really quite remarkable. You would even have the high score screen or information pop up in big, huge screens, or extra ball or whatever.
Yep.
It was when it was implemented
when it worked,
correctly.
It was great.
It looked awesome.
Maybe great was a little far, but it was a very unique and very drawing visual effect. It made you want to look to see what was happening.
Now, when they took this first prototype in, people were blown away with this. And they're like, "Bam, you've done it. This is way better than what we had." And they were on. And so at that point, they had to decide. They wanted to get a pinball machine done in 18 months. And what that meant is a normal pinball machine is developed in 18 months. Now, keep in mind, you've got Williams. These guys are the Cadillacs. These guys are the studs of pinball, and all the best guys are working there, a lot of the best guys. And so they had 18 months to not only build a new machine out of this technology, but to actually make the technology. How was it going to work? Right. And so they knew that Pinball 2000 was going to be expensive because there's so much extra stuff in it. For example, just the computer element of it. And this thing ran on an old... I remember this distinctly. It ran on an old Cyrix motherboard. These motherboards actually sought after today to replace. And now they have come up with new stuff for this, but there was a good time when these motherboards were very difficult to get hold of. But it was just a PC motherboard. I think it had like I had like a CGA or EGA or some video. They had just a computer monitor. Is my point. Yeah. It was nothing special, but you're talking $500 additional cost.
Right, and pinball's already expensive to manufacture.
Yeah. So they're like, listen, we've got to develop this to where we can get the people to buy it, and then people, after that initial cost, we can save them some money because we'll be able to integrate new tables. And so what they developed was a really awesome system where you could literally pull the glass off, reach in and pull the entire guts of the machine out, unconnect like 3 things, and then pull it out. And trust me, when you work on pinball machines, that's a miracle. Man, bring that stuff. Gimme.
Yeah.
And so they wanted something they could, just much like JAMA, the arcade interface ability to where you could just put in multiple boards. They wanted to be able to put multiple tables in the machine. So they worked real hard on getting that smooth and doing stuff that operators liked. Secondly, since they had to do so much in 18 months, they decided to go back and do instead of coming up with a whole new concept for a table or trying to secure a license, they wanted to do something that they were familiar with. And so they went back and looked at some of their properties that had been popular. One of the big games for Williams had been the Mars game, Attack from Mars. Excuse me. And Attack from Mars was a big production run game, very popular. It's still very popular.
Yes.
In fact, it's way more popular than Revenge from Mars.
Yes.
and it was an alien invasion game. It was not based on the film, but it was similar, except better. And so they thought, well, let's use this. We'll use, because we know what we need. We know what we're going to be working with. And so they put this together, and it was Revenge from Mars, which I'll get into later, because that's the game I picked this week. So they get it all put together, and they go to their investors, or they go to the people that buy their pinball machines. And the pinball machine, they show them off. They do a lot of publicity for it, and it gets over. In an era where machines weren't getting big runs, they ended up selling right around 7,000 units, which is at the time
tremendous.
Well, it's not tremendous. It's pretty good.
A lot.
It's
for a high dollar machine. That's a lot.
It's pretty good, and the reception's pretty good. And I remember when we first saw these things. When you saw these in an arcade, it was really an anomaly, because I mean it's a shorter play field than a proper pinball machine.
It's about 3/4.
Plus, it's got no back glass per se. It's got no back box. It's just got that. I mean, it's nothing like you can't watch a score roll up or so. You sort of have to stand behind the guy playing it to get the full effect, you know. So I always wondered how much that hurt it, you know. But of course, Battlezone was a huge success. You couldn't see nothing when people were playing that. So. Pinball 2000, they were very enthusiastic, and for the first time in years, Williams made a profit in pinball. And these guys were like, bam, we're in. So they knew they needed a good follow-up to this to keep the ball rolling. Right now, the game they ended up choosing was the game they chose to be the very first Pin 2000 machine, but the timing was off. And what they ended up with was they secured an expensive licensing deal to make a pinball for Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, which was a ridiculously huge deal, because that was the big deal at the time. People have been clamoring for Star Wars for a long time. Now, when they designed Star Wars had not came out. Phantom Menace was not out, and so they had to literally sequester the team. They couldn't talk to anybody. They couldn't interact with any other engineers. Couldn't do nothing. Well, and this is a speculation. This has been talked about by the actual people that made it. It hurt the product, because at Williams you would have all these guys. The games were vetted severely amongst the top players and designers on Earth that have ever walked. And this game didn't get that kind of scrutiny. And so when this thing released, and it released not too long after, this was the second game they released that year. It coincided with the film. Well, the film, tell them how it did.
Here's what you have to remember. The lead up to Star Wars Episode 1 was tremendous.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when the film was not as popular as they had believed it to be, it really hurt things trying to pull from that source.
Yeah.
But instead of having something that they thought would be in theaters for like years, I mean, they thought this was going to be the absolute
not
biggest
years, but a long time.
Right. They thought this was going to be the absolute biggest movie that existed. When the reception was mixed at best, it really hurt things trying to pull from the Star Wars name.
Yeah, so this game ended up releasing in June of '99. So get this, you know who designed this game? The designer was John Papaduic, and I thought, who is this guy? What's he done? Well, he's done a bunch of Zizzles. If you remember, that's like a consumer home pinball machine that was popular. He did World Cup soccer. Then he did a couple machines I think are awesome. Theater of Magic, Tales of the Arabian Nights. So they didn't put Hack Joe.
No, that's
this
big,
is a stud. And he was also
man.
one of the guys that helped work on Pinball 2000. Now, when Star Wars Episode 1 came out in the arcade, I remember distinctly. I thought it looked like crap.
Yeah, it did.
It had a big lightsaber stuck to the side, but the playfield looked so small to me and so tiny. Something else that Pinball 2000 had problems with was its position in the arcade was important. You had to get it somewhere where there wasn't a lot of light shining in there. You know, the thing shadowed the proper area. If a directional light shone on it, you're boned.
Yeah.
Arcade operators didn't know what to make of it, and often it would break down and never get fixed. I've seen many where the actual monitor wasn't working.
Yeah.
And what you've got without the monitor is a very lame pinball machine.
Very bad, very poorly designed.
I mean, well, I mean, effectively it's unplayable.
It becomes a very poorly designed pinball
right,
machine.
without the video elements, you can't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
So, and I will say, I thought the Revenge of Mars was a better machine.
It was.
But they both had the same problem with technical problems, and sometimes the stuff wouldn't be lined up right. It was a hassle, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, because since the actual playfield of a Pinball 2000 was dark, you relied on the positioning of the video elements to line up your shots.
Yeah.
So if the monitor was askew, you would literally be shooting off target all the time.
And it just took a little bit.
A little bit. Well, a little bit at the top meant a lot at the bottom.
Yeah.
So it made those things had to be really nicely calibrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, on top of the fact, so the film has a huge opening and then flops over. You got the whole Jar Jar Binks thing. I mean, some people like it. I thought it was garbage. I thought it was hot garbage. I didn't like it a bit. So, the film doesn't do well. Well, on top of that, when Williams Corporate released this, they're like, listen, we're going to make some money on this sucker. Instead of lowering the cost for all these people that bought the first, we're going to raise the cost.
Yeah.
Cost goes up. Okay? Well, guess what? Cost goes up, movie flops, pinball machine not that great. You sell half as many units.
Yeah.
So they only sold like, it was less than 4,000 units, 3,525, and they cut the production run short because they weren't selling.
They were just stacking up in a warehouse, yep.
So they were planning their third game, all right? And they looked at a couple. One of them was a game called Wizard Blocks. There were a few others that were in the pipeline, including a Playboy game, which I would have liked because the Playboy Stern, I think they did it, was tremendous, the newer one. I thought it was really good, not just because of the hot chicks. I just thought it was a fun game.
Yeah, it was.
And seeing hot chicks is good provocation to do better with your shots, I found. But anyway, all this stuff, they had nothing really ready to go for the third machine. These machines took double the people to make. They were more expensive because you went into the realm of video production. You went in the realm of 3D rendering, stuff that Pinball had never done. And so it was a stretch. And you had a lot of people that had never done that sort of work. Even if you look at the video for Revenge from Mars, and I'll get into this moment, you've got guys doing 3D rendering stuff that had never done it, and so it wasn't the best.
No,
it was not the best. You know, it's like the acting in the American laser games. Like, it's certainly not the best because these guys aren't real actors. You know, they're just goofs. So, unfortunately, but that much said, these Pinball 2000 still had a lot of potential, and they were doing okay. They were doing okay. Well, okay wasn't good enough for Big Daddy, WMS Williams. And unfortunately...
Because the problem was, Pinball 2000 was doing okay, slot machines were blowing it out of the water. I mean, they were making money as fast. They were cranking out slot machines as fast as they could, and they still couldn't keep up with demand.
The big difference is, slot machines, you get a couple of guys to design them, and there's not any real with the exception of the graphics, there's not a whole lot of difference. You can crank them out.
And then you could, just modify the code to make your next one.
So, Williams decided to effectively jettison their entire pinball division.
Yep.
This was, at the time, this was known as basically the death of pinball.
Yep.
By the year 2000... I mean, Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, June of '99, last machine released from Williams. They were done, and it was a long time with one pinball company who struggled for a long time.
Yeah. And you know what? Thank goodness Stern kept cranking them out, because literally pinball could be completely dead, and it's nowhere like where it used to be. But now you have new companies coming on board. Yeah. It's starting to
we're having a second renaissance. Yeah. We're in the middle of it, actually, thanks to Stern. And I'll admit, a lot of Stern's newer machines, they don't feel as quality. But I mean, they make them to specs that are lower quality.
Stern is...
And they're all licensed almost always.
Yeah, Stern is in a cycle where they know how much they can make from their pinball machine division. They know how much they're allowed to spend, and they market it.
Yeah.
You don't have... No one takes risks at Stern anymore.
Yeah.
You buy a license, you put together a pin. I'm not saying their pins are bad. Some of their pins, even their new pins, are really good. But you get a license, you make the pinball machine, you sell the pinball machine, you go on to the next one. There's not the heart that was really in it in some of the mid 90s.
Now, a lot of the designers from Williams ended up going to Stern because they were the only game in
nowhere
town.
else to go.
Eventually, Jersey Jacks came into the picture with their Wizard of Oz pin, and they've released a couple. I think at least one or two more. So pinball's back, but this was the late '90s. To end this segment was a very bleak, desolate time for pinball because it was almost over. Yeah. And Stern and Gary, I'll give Gary Stern a lot of credit, like you mentioned. He has a passion for pinball. It's a family tradition up there, Chicago, and he kept the ball rolling.
Yep.
So, anyway, out of this sort of murky, depressing area of pinball, we had to come up with a couple machines to talk about. And so I'll go ahead and start the show since we're on the topic of Pinball 2000. The machine I picked was, in fact, Revenge from Mars.
Yes.
Revenge from Mars was released in January of 1999, so very late 90s.
Yes.
And it was on the pinball system. It was designed, as I mentioned earlier, by a fellow named George Gomez. Gomez has made, we were just talking about guys that made newer machines. Gomez, who's sort of a very legendary pinball designer, he's been responsible for Monster Bash, very popular machine.
Very
Johnny
popular
Mnemonic, which is a machine that went well past its god-awful license.
Yes.
That's an abomination on William Gibson's novels. I hated that movie. He did NBA Fast Break, which, hey, I'm no basketball fan, but that's a great machine.
Awesome machine.
Then he's did some of the newer titles, Avengers, Sopranos, the Batman, 60s Batman revival, Lord of the Rings, which I know a lot of people love. I've played it. I think it's okay. And the Transformers machine. So they gave this guy the big licenses. They said, go to work, son.
Proven track record, that's why.
The Pinball 2000, as we mentioned, was this sad attempt to try to rescue pinball. So we know what Pinball 2000 was as a concept, but what was the game like?
Yeah.
So Attack from Mars had been, like I said, as we mentioned, in the early 90s, had been a very popular pinball machine for Williams, and so they wanted to go with something that was tried and true and known, and they went with Revenge from Mars, because if you think about it, that's a very loose concept machine. This might be one of the last high-profile non-licensed machines that there ever was, if you think about it, because I don't think Stern. Okay, name another one. That was from that era.
From that era.
I mean, I'm just saying. I'm not saying of all time. I'm just saying it was one of the last ones that wasn't licensed. So if you picture aliens from Mars coming to kill Earth, they'd come down here and screw with us. That's what they were. And these were the kind of wacky aliens from the film that would come down to and their antics in the first game. Their gimmick was they went around trying to destroy all the cities in the United States, and they had on the old orange dot matrix display up there. They would show the aliens try to tip over the Eiffel Tower, and they would be trying to steal women, and doing all this crazy stuff. And so this was the concept that was behind Revenge from Mars. In this game, they're back. they're back to raise hell. So the playfield on Revenge from Mars is sort of similar to Attack from Mars in a lot of ways. Yeah. It's got UFOs right around the flippers area, and then of course, unlike the original Attack from Mars, Revenge from Mars has more open field at the top, and this is where your video aspects come in. So you're not going to have the some of the ramps and lanes and stuff that you would see. I mean, it still has some of that stuff, but they leave some of that open for the video.
There's almost no ramp action. It's almost all orbitals. The difference is a ramp, you actually go up an elevated plane, and then the ball travels through a set of either wire mesh or sometimes plastic.
Yeah. And
it redirects your ball. Or an orbital goes basically outside the perimeter of the machine. It's still in the playfield, of course, but and usually those type of things send the ball coming back to you a lot faster.
Yeah. Now, one thing that started happening, Roy, I think this is mostly a 90s thing, was sort of like mission-based pinball. You know what I'm saying? The rule sets had became very. They had kind of went into a nice notch in pinball, and everyone sort of done this where you would start a mode, you would complete a mode, and if you completed enough modes, you'd start a bigger mode, and at the end you would get like a main mode where you really
wizard mode,
right? And so that they didn't change that in this. the difference in this was you had video taking care of the stuff on the DMD, and it was mentioned that one of the limitations of the original Attack from Mars is they had to do everything on the DMD, and it's hard to render things accurately on the DMD that to make it real visually stunning.
Correct.
So this game makes up for that. The aliens, they float down. They're 3D rendered aliens of the time, mind you, and they kind of walk like this. And they shamble in, and in the original machine, they had little rubber toys that went like this.
Yeah,
remember those?
They would bounce. Yeah,
and so this had actual aliens that would come down, and a lot of the modes are shooting aliens that are just on the middle of the play field. You're also shooting ships. Sometimes you have to do stuff, and the video will show you the results of what you do. There's a mode where you fight. They make America or the United States, the world. They come up with a giant robotic Abe Lincoln.
Yeah.
And he's fighting this giant giant alien.
Yeah.
And if you do the modes right, he goes like, "Bye!" He gets a big uppercut. And it knocks the alien straight up in the air and through a UFO, and they explode. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a good sequence.
There's sequences. There's all kinds of crazy sequences where they take everything you can do with an alien and they do it. There's an alien autopsy sequence.
It's very slapstick.
Oh yeah, it's
all slapstick.
There's a great mode. Probably my favorite mode in the machine is a bit where the aliens are trying to straighten the Leaning Tower of Pisa,
yes.
and you're trying to
you're trying to stop them for a second.
Trying to knock the crap out of these aliens. I thought that was pretty funny. Excuse me. There's a in the first game there was a like a big laser weapon you were building. It comes back, and you have to do that. You have to do that. There's also Martian Bowling. It's exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
There's a tank section where you've got to hit this moving tank. It's pretty cool. So a lot of stuff is target based with the video overlay. Now, Pinball 2000. Aside from the fact that you could overlay the aliens and the spaceships on the glass, they would actually. I mean, you got to think there was no back glass. There was no scoring reel, really. So what they would do is they would show you that information. Like, it would tell you what modes to go into on the screen. It would actually show you, which was pretty cool. But if you had a ball in play, when these big things would happen, it effectively blocks your vision. And that happens sometimes. That was one of the downfalls of Pinball 2000 is when the guys rightly noticed that when you have a separate screen and the pinball machine, your eyes can't watch both. And so Pinball 2000 was supposed to integrate this, and it's good and bad. But the bad part of it is when you integrate it so completely that you can't see the field, you got a problem. And when that happened, you would often lose a ball, and it was real cheap. And what made it worse is Pinball 2000 to play it was more expensive. It was just like the Dragon's Lair of its day.
It was.
You're in for $1. I mean, or at least, it was the days of 50 cents were over. You're paying, this is $1 machine, so it was more pricey. These guys wanted to get their money back. Something else that they did, and this is Pinball 2000, but it happened first in this game. This game saw the effectively the default removal of a free game system.
Yes.
In this game, by default, now I'll say this because you could still turn this on, but by default, you could not earn a free game. You could not match for a free game, but what you could do is get an extra ball. And so you could get extra balls in the game, but you could not get a free play. People don't like that. Now, this was not the first game to pull that trick. They'd actually pulled it in a few games before this, turning off the default. And this is, of course, to limit the amount of free play on the game. They wanted people to pay for every game, and this was no exception. They wanted you to pay for every game. So a lot of arcade owners went ahead and turned it back on. I'm sure they, because they get complaints.
Yeah, a lot of
complaints about the game. All reports were the game, like I said, it was not in the realm of sturdiness of a game. This fell somewhere between, say, like a classic Williams machine, like Firepower, let's say, and Dragon's Lair, which was notorious for going down to a pole position. Like, this was somewhere in the middle. This one had its problems, and like I said, they were almost always screen related. What would happen often is that the motherboard, which again, this is just a stock consumer PC motherboard, would just have problems. I mean, if you had a PC back in those days, RAM slipped out, things overheated, the fan went bad.
And when you're smacking around on a machine, all that's more likely to happen.
Yeah, and when your operators would these are guys who knew how to fix pinball machines and video games, but they didn't know jack squat about fixing computers.
Yeah.
Then you've got a whole different gimmick here. So, despite the initial sales of Revenge from Mars, and again, these games are supposed to be modular. I don't know that a whole lot of swapping was done.
No, I don't think any was.
When they were designing Revenge from Mars, there was a lot of speculation and talk about what to do about the side art. A lot of the guys at Williams wanted to put generic art on the side, so you could swap out that board, and it wouldn't matter what the side art was. But they wanted Revenge from Mars to be such a smash that they went ahead and put a full art ensemble on it. So there's art along the top of the shielded area, and then there's art down the sides. And it looks good. I thought the art was it's a good art package. And Revenge from Mars, just the title of it and the weirdness of the look of the machine, it actually sort of works in the favor of the
really did.
Because it's so weird, and it's such a goofy game that you're like, man, look at this weird contraption. Now again, we mentioned that the playfield on these things were cut short. I always thought that, and you wouldn't think cutting an inch or two off would make much of a difference, but it makes a huge difference. It wasn't that different, really.
It was a three-fourths machine.
No, it was not. It wasn't even that much. But it was a difference. When you first played these, I know you played Revenge from Mars back in the day.
Yeah.
What did you think about the limited table size? Because we come from an era like, if you look behind me here, we've got Royal Rumble right here. This is a wide body machine, the big dogs, right?
Yeah.
Sega was pumping these suckers out, among others. And they were very popular, and we love it because you got all that space, you got all these long shots. So to go from and this machine predates, I think this thing was 94. Mm-hmm. So it's not like these things had gone away. So when you take something, you're literally taking a table that's not quite, it's a little more than half the size, but I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big difference. Yeah. And when you're used to playing on these big machines, the little ones are a little bit wacky. What did you think of playing Revenge from Mars?
I remember the first time I saw a Pinball 2000 machine, which was Revenge from Mars. And it was in a movie theater.
Yep.
So I went up. I happily paid my $1, even though I did not have many dollars at the time to happily pay.
Yep, I know that feeling.
And I was like, all right, let's see what this thing can do. Because on the attraction screens, you kind of get a feel what's going on, and it gets you excited. The attraction screens on these are really good.
Yeah.
So you put your money in, and I remember I plunged my ball. And I was playing, and every shot felt off. And I would try to adjust, but my game lasted like 3 minutes. It was brutally hard to adjust to this pinball machine. I thought, well, is it the screen? The way the Pinball 2000 is implemented? Am I just really bad? So I gave it another go. I distinctly remember this. I gave it another go, and I had a shorter game my second time than my first time, and I was done. I walked away. I eventually came back, but I remember that first two games left such a poor impression on me on the playability of Pinball 2000, or Revenge from Mars in particular, that it took me quite a while to come back to it. I mean, it was months. And I came back to it, and I tried it again. I did a little bit better after I learned a little bit. But I think the shorter play table...
it makes it sort of faster.
It makes orbitals just death.
Yeah.
They come screaming back so fast because it doesn't feel like they adjusted the power of the flippers at all. So you're flipping up the field just as fast as you would on a normal machine, but you're losing half the distance, or, the distance up and back when something comes around an orbital, and these things were made to shoot orbitals. You shot tons of them.
I think one of the downfalls in terms of playability, because I'll say these games were not embraced. Revenge from Mars was released, and again, keep in mind, Attack from Mars is super popular, so you had something that was real popular amongst pinball people. Although they had their complaints about it as well. A lot of pinball people did not like video modes on the DMDs. And so what you've done is exponentially make these a much bigger deal on Pinball 2000. And a lot of pinball purists didn't like them, still don't like them, and they told Williams, we don't like these. You've bastardized pinball in a way that we don't like it. You made it a video game. And some liked it, but a lot didn't, a lot of purists. Now, at the time, I was just a guy who played pinball. I didn't consider myself I never thought I'd own one. And so when I got to play this for the first time, it really is. It can't be harped on enough how much like playing a Laserdisc game for the first time this was, because it had really two things in common. It was completely new gameplay you'd never seen before, and it was expensive. And so it was expensive to get in there and get good at it. I mean, and so when Dragon's Lair came out, it was such a novel concept that people laid down their dollars and their 50 cents left and right. There were lines. Well, how did Dragon's Lair 2 do? How did Space Ace do? None of them did very well.
They didn't touch the original.
Right. And and the thing is that like Space Ace is just as artistic, just as beautiful, more advanced, but people had already sickened of it. The novelty had worn off.
Right.
Pinball 2000, I think, was very similar, except for the fact that novelty ran off quicker because it was not as radical a departure from as Laserdisc games were to arcade games. So what you got an unusual, alien feeling experience that was expensive. It was hard for people to watch you play, and it was also hard to get the illusion of the video on the pinball playfield if you weren't playing.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you stood behind the guy, you could see it. Otherwise, the top of the playfield where the video was covered, and you couldn't see it. So a lot of pinball games and a lot of video games, people are hover around to see it. There was no way to rig up a video screen to have it work. It didn't look right. Yeah. I think that was part of it. So it didn't have a lot of word of mouth. And again, we go back to the fact that these things were often misaligned, broken, or at a spot where the light wasn't great. And without that illusion, you've got a cut-rate pinball. I mean, that's face facts. And I think the ultimate downfall of Pinball 2000 began with Revenge from Mars. Not that it's not a good game, but that the concept has enough flaws. I think what I would have done if I was them was I would have released this game and not raise the price that much. Maybe not at all. Well, because you've got to get people used to the fact that this is a new concept.
But that's an operator choice.
But they recommended that. Plus, turning off the free game, you're getting chintzy. Now, I watched. There's a very famous documentary called "Tilt: The Battle to Save Pinball." Well, they talk about these were more expensive machines, and these games were a premium game. But you have no chance if you don't get people invested in the new technology. And I think that's where this failed. I mean, Revenge from Mars had all the earmarks that a good pinball machine had. It's got tons of different modes and stuff, and tons of multi-ball as well. But in the end, it was just too alien. I think Pinball 2000 was probably screwed even if Star Wars hadn't came out.
You're probably right.
So, I looked this up on Internet Pinball Database. That's the #1 ipso facto place to go for that sort of thing. And the rating is an 8 out of 10, which is pretty high.
Yeah, I think that's inflated.
Just for record keeping, Star Wars Episode 1 has a 7.5 out of 10. Yeah. I think I think both those are probably too high.
I think they're inflated. Because unfortunately, what you'll have is people who sell their machines will go on and start rating their pinball machines higher to get them ready to sell.
I will tell you, there is no way for a home user right now to play Revenge from Mars. There is no emulated version. There's no. It's not featured on any of the packages. Now, I've heard talk that it's possible it would be included in some of the new pinball packages from what's the name? The guys that are doing all the pinballs now, all the Williams stuff. But right now, it's not playable. So the only way you're going to find this is to know someone that's got one or see one on location. If you wanted to buy one, that's one way you could do it.
Yeah.
These are actually pretty reasonable. I thought a working Revenge from Mars will set you back $3,500 plus shipping. Shipping on something like this, you're talking, if they crate it up, you're talking about $600.
That's crazy cheap.
Yeah, and now Star Wars is selling for $4,100, which just goes to show you that quality and price are certainly.
You're buying the name.
Yeah, right. If it's for collectors and stuff, but really both those, if in the realm of pinball these days, that's a steal.
That's a steal. Unfortunately, you will, if you do have mechanical failures, you're in deep doo.
Yeah, correct. And they've got. There's a thing called new tech, or not new tech, new something. It's a replacement for all the computer and stuff in it. So there is an alternative now. I think those guys are still around. That was a pretty big deal when it came out because a lot of these units were failing.
Yeah.
And if you get a good solid system, these will last you a while. They are well-made machines, and they're easy to work on.
Sure.
So, but yeah, Revenge of Mars. It's a pretty good pinball machine. I wouldn't put it in my pantheon of the great machines of all times, but the concept, very sound. So let's move away from the realm of Pinball 2000 to a more traditional pinball table, which is what you chose this week. Brent, I think you chose a good one considering we have it sitting over here. What do you got for us?
I chose Whodunit, a murder mystery. This is my all-time favorite pinball machine.
Really? Over Star Trek?
This is my all-time favorite pinball machine. I first played this in a truck stop. And I returned to that truck stop many, many times just to play pinball. Because I guess that's how I roll.
Was this the same truck stop that had a Mortal Kombat too?
It was.
Okay.
It was.
We shouldn't have been at that truck stop, but we were there.
Yes. Whodunit is a LA Noire themed murder mystery that is, you either love it because of its incredible charm and allure, or you hate it because it's stop and go pinball. There's almost no in between with this game. So this machine was released at the end of '95.
Just into the wire there.
Yeah. And the concept was by Dwight Sullivan. It is one of those machines that, really looking at it, among a sea of pinball machines, you're going to notice one thing. And that is, in the middle of the play field is a slot machine. It's a 3-reel REEL slot machine.
It's funny, we were just talking about pinball machine people making slot machines, and lo and behold,
there you go. And this was a Bally Williams machine.
Yeah.
So this feature on the machine is a fully functional slot machine that spins. It has the random elements, a whole 9 yards. It very, very incredible. I mean, a lot of machines have toys. This toy in particular was very impressive at the time. Very impressive. It also features, in the middle of the playfield, a 180-degree ramp, which means you shoot the ball up the ramp, and it actually flips over, and the ball comes back to you on a ramp system. It's the main feature of the game that lets you move around this hotel, or move around the casino, trying to find clues, and you get off of different floors. It's a big part of the game. What makes this really, really unique, though, is there is a actual story with an actual timeline about the game. A lot of people never saw this because it was only released in the manual of the game. But the game has a story. It involves all the characters. All the characters have nicknames that you don't know unless you read this story. And the timeline covers like 40 years. It's from the birth of one of the characters all the way up until the murders start taking place.
Wonder why they would write that in the manual and it's not in the actual game. That's bizarre.
Well, I mean, it's because it was huge. It's like 6 pages.
That's crazy.
And it's something, if you ever go and download the manual to Whodunit and flip through it, it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's dark. You had people dying during childbirth and double crosses, and it tells you how all the characters in this game is intertwined.
That makes me think this is like a labor of love sort of thing. Yeah.
100% was. It really was. And if you go in knowing the story and knowing how the characters are related to each other, because you play as the detective trying to solve these mysteries, it actually helps. As the game progresses, you get clues, and I mean, some of these are vague clues that who left this behind, and it might be like a comb or a mirror or something. And if you know the backstory in the manual, you actually have more insight onto who would have owned that and be more apt to pick the correct killer. And you do. You actually pick who is the killer in this game. So you go through 5 cases, and effectively after that the game restarts and you do it all again. The unfortunate part of Whodunit is there's no wizard mode. There's no final thing to bring it all together. There are tons of different modes, tons of different multi-balls. You can actually gamble your points, which is one of the most ingenious features ever. You bet on a roulette, either black or red, and you gamble half your points. It's a choice. So you can get, huge scores, or you can get crappy score, lose half your points.
This particular item in the game is very controversial amongst tournament players and whatnot. This game, well, you can turn that off, I believe.
Yes, if you'll first of all, you'll never see this in a tournament. You almost never see this in a tournament setting because it is pretty easy to cheese the game to where you can just shoot a low value score forever.
Yeah, and also it's plotting.
Yeah,
as a pinball machine. So there's a lot. They want to get this tournament. They want to have fast stuff in there. Yeah,
right. A normal game of Whodunit can last you 15 minutes.
Yeah, easily.
There is a tournament setting though that takes all the randomness out of it. It all goes down to a set. This happens when you shoot it the first time. This happens when you shoot it the second time. Including the gambling element. It starts on red and then goes red, black, red, black. But Whodunit tells a story, and it does it remarkably well. You can, when you see these people acting out on the DMD, and their speech and their talk, they got really good voice actors.
Yeah, this is probably the best of all time. In terms of, this is the best non-licensed acting I've ever heard.
And one of the voices in this, the guy who plays the butler, is Ed Boon from Mortal Kombat. One of the Mortal Kombat designers.
That's crazy. No, I didn't know that.
So yeah, which shows you again how Williams really everybody worked on a project when they did something.
Yeah. Because Midway was under their umbrella there as well after a while.
So, why is this my favorite pinball machine? It is exactly what I said. It tells a story. You can play this game, and you get a random murder mystery to start every time. And you can't just say, I'm going to choose who the killer is. Oh, you can, but it's a 1 in 4 shot.
Right.
You can actually go through, get clues. The LA Noir theme fits so perfectly. The music is phenomenal.
It's the best pinball music.
Goodness.
Yeah, I agree.
And, it has this soft jazzy type tune. It plays Peter Gunn's song.
If you watch old Mike Hammers or old detective shows from back in the day, or listen to old detective radio shows, you could have pulled this right out of a radio show, like Suspense or something. This would have been it.
And the main character, just like in an LA Noir film, narrates as he goes.
Yeah.
And he is so perfect.
He's great. He's tremendous.
This is a pinball machine. Is this pinball machine for everybody? No, because some people want to have the excitement of the pinball machine, the big scores, the fast action, and I totally get that. I'm that way too. What Whodunit does is it pulls you in. It pulls all that in, and you focus on the machine, and you focus on the story, and you worry less about the shots. You get the shots because you want to see what happens next,
or gather clues or whatnot.
Right.
They do a good job.
It is the only pinball machine, with the exception of maybe Arabian Nights, Tales of the Arabian Nights, that has a similar feel that pulls you into the machine and makes you want to play it to see what happens next, which is very, very rare in a pinball machine.
I think Tales is a better overall playing pinball machine, but I think this, as a package, you're going to be hard pressed. Whodunit stands as a unique machine, the likes of a Pinball 2000. It's that unique as a pinball machine. It's highly collectible because of that, and the atmosphere it creates, and plus as you play it, you are gathering clues. At the end of the mysteries, you're chasing the bad guy, and you have to hit certain shots. There's a phone in it. You have to hit when the phone rings. You got to hit the phone with the ball to answer the phone, so you can hear to get the clue. You know, sometimes you have to take a cab. You have to hit your ball up into the cab area.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to take the train. You have to hit your ball up in the train area. It's very cleverly done. It's like watching an old episode of a TV show. I mean, you can see the flow of it. And since it's the only machine ever that every game starts with someone getting murdered on the DMD.
And there's multiple murder scenes.
Yeah, there's a shower. There's like somebody gets shoved off a building.
Shot.
Yeah.
They actually pulled in, I'm going to butcher this name, Tim Kizzaro, who is a professional voice actor, to do the main character's voice.
It worked.
And
you couldn't have had a hack.
Stunning job.
If they just got one of the guys making the machines, that would have failed, died a death. It would have died a death.
So this is a machine. I mean, the reason why we're going on and on and on about the sound is it's that good.
Yeah, it's the top of the heap.
And the machine itself, really, and remember, this is my favorite machine of all time. The machine itself is pretty good, not great.
Right. I mean, the actual shots and stuff.
Right. The shots you take. The elevator in the middle with the 180 ramp is a gimmick.
It stops. I mean, Rumble has a very similar situation where you've got to when you put a ramp in the middle of the play field, it stops a lot of your long shooting, your target shooting. And this game has, I mean, it's so crowded with ramps and stuff that
it's a very full machine.
Yeah.
But the reason why this is my favorite machine is because it took a chance, and the package is far greater than some of its parts.
Yeah, I agree.
Something else I want to mention, and this is never talked about, the Williams, this was off of the the WPC system. Okay, this was actually a WPC-S board.
Okay.
And a lot of pinball machines, if you don't know, from the same manufacturers, they'll have one main CPU driver board that usually lasts the span of about 10 to 15 pinball machines.
Maybe not even that many.
That you know, they'll do ROM changes on to change what the game does. But this is the main backbone of the machine.
It's sort of like CPS with a video game for like Capcom. You have CPS 1, CPS 2. They build the same way. Yeah.
So a feature on this board. This was a time when ticket games started to invade the arcades, and Williams saw this was happening, and they actually put a feature onto their WPC boards that allows ticket dispensing through your pinball machine, either when you get an extra ball, or when you beat the high score, or if you make a certain shot in the game. The machine will actually dispense tickets.
They've got to be super rare, because I know we'd have one if you could get hold of one.
I have one.
Oh, really?
But I can't get it to work. I have a ticket dispenser board that hooks to these machines. It's in that cabinet right now. Yes. If you look right beside the coin mechs is the ticket dispenser.
I never even noticed it.
Yeah. So
how many pinball machines had this feature?
All of the WPC boards did.
Really?
So it's available to about 15 pinball machines.
Yeah.
I have looked far and wide with someone with the knowledge to explain to me how to properly hook up my board, and I've never found it. It is a lost, and there is no manual for this. It's mentioned in the actual manual. I know it works. It has things in the BIOS to set up to be ticket dispensing, but I have looked far and wide on forums, news groups, chat rooms, live streams. People know that this feature exists for these old pinball machines, but they don't know how to make it work. It is a lost relic of something that was put in for an extra feature and then completely forgot about because pinball people don't want tickets.
I wonder why. It's a great idea, because
it is.
Now you can't do anything in an arcade except play those god-awful ticket games. My only guess would be it would not be in vogue because of the size of the machine and the length of time it would take to get your tickets out. Some of these games, you put a quarter in for like 2 seconds, and you're done. You know?
Yes, you
know what I mean?
You don't put it in as a ticket game. You put it in as a game that gives tickets.
It's not a bad idea. I know you love that crap.
If anyone out there in listener land knows how to hook one of these things up, please comment, get a hold of me. I have everything I believe that is necessary. I just don't have the knowledge of how to get to work. So that was my personal plea. There were 2,416 whodunits made.
Very low. A pretty low run for the 90s.
Right,
yeah.
a low but not criminally low.
I can see why too. Given that, I mean, if this pinball machine was not, I'm surprised this made it to the market. Given the way it works.
It is a player's machine, and you don't have to be great to have long games.
Yeah.
And for owner-operators, they don't want that.
No.
They want you to put your money in, fail, put your money in, fail.
Yep.
A few things about this: Easter eggs. Pinball's got them.
Yeah.
And Whodunit is no exception. It has a few features that are on a couple different games called Midnight Madness. If while you're playing, the internal clock hits midnight, the game shuts off. It freezes. You lose your ball, and the main character actually says like, "Oh no, it's happening." And you enter a mode called Midnight Madness, which is a multi-ball that is just crazy. It's just shooting balls. I'm gonna try that.
I've never tried that.
Yeah, that's how it has it. Another thing, if you put in flipper, you put in your money, and before you shoot your ball, you can do different flipper combinations to give you different hidden Easter egg messages up on the DMD. Something else, there is hidden in the back glass and in an Easter egg through flipper combinations of the letters D-O-H-O, Doho. This is a running gag theme Easter egg through many for decades of pinball. And Doho stands for Doris, I cannot remember, Doris Ho, the Dorothy Ho, which was one of the pinball guys' girlfriend/wife. And it became a running gag to put Doho into a bunch of the games. So it's it shows you, I mean, I love stuff like this because it shows you that these people, well, first of all, it shows you they're people. Because they're out there, they're wanting to have fun while they're making this stuff. They're not just automatons putting it together because that's the way it has to be. They're out there having fun. And a lot of these Easter eggs are in there. They're just fun. And that's another one. I know that you like this game, but you don't love this game. What's your personal experience with it?
Well, I do actually. I love what it is. I mean, it's a beautiful game. When we picked it up, I know you were very happy, and it is a tremendous game. It's a lot of fun. It's easy to start off with. Also, you didn't mention, I believe this thing has like doesn't it have the beginner mode?
It does. Yeah, I was going to touch on that. When you very first start the game, you can choose either novice or expert, and if you choose novice, you get a guaranteed 3 minutes of playtime.
Yeah.
I mean, you could lose the ball 100 times in that amount of time. And then once your 3 minutes are up, and I think that's actually adjustable. I think you can set how long. Then the next time you lose the ball, your game's over.
It's great. That stuff's great when you have like kids coming over
Little
to play.
kids that just want to shoot and hit the flippers. Yeah.
But no, I mean the packs of this game. It's as I say, it is more in the sum of its parts than the parts themselves. I mean, it's a tremendous achievement, an artistic achievement in pinball. It's got, like I said, Brent mentioned it, that people either love it or hate it. I love it. I've always liked it. I've always been fond of it. I always thought it was a real fun game, and it's one I go back to. You know, we've got two more modern machines, this one and Royal Rumble, and they came out roughly in the same time. Like I said, Rumble was out the year before Whodunit, but they're dramatically different playing machines. They're really quite different, and they're both fun in their own right. But I mean, in terms of an artistic achievement, Whodunit is far and away at the top of the heap of pinball.
Yes. And just my final thoughts on this before we go into the pricing. If you ever get a chance, you can play this through emulation, and it emulates okay. You know what? It emulates a better than okay because of the type of game it is. It emulates fairly well.
You could also get this if you had the Pinball Arcade. They released this on that,
Correct.
And it was pretty good.
It was pretty good.
It's not the same. I mean, it never is.
However, there are the moving elements of this game, the actual moving slots under the playfield. They really have to be witnessed, and the 180 ramp has a very unique sound and feel when you go up and loop over on it.
Yeah, it's real unusual. That's an unusual ramp.
If you ever get a chance to play this, definitely put your money in. If you're ever in the area of Amigo Studio East, we will let you play it. We own this machine. We picked this machine up.
We got a good deal on this thing, didn't we?
What? It was about the year, what?
Yeah, I can't
2004?
It's funny because we went over to look at a Operation Wolf.
Yeah. And I bought this machine. When I bought it, it was in pristine condition. It's still in really, really good condition for $1,250. The current going price, the absolute cheapest I saw it for a machine that was kind of banged up was $3,800.
Yeah,
the totally shopped, ready to go is a $5,000 machine.
Yeah, this has become a $5,000 machine. Both these machines have went up in price exponentially, which is crazy. So, as we bid Fonda Dude Whodunit, I know who's going to do it.
Nope.
It's going to be you as we spin the wheel.
Oh, gee. Oh, here goes.
Here we go. Now, tell the people, Mr. Brent, what you've added this week. This was a Brent added this. Well, actually, he asked my opinion. I told him what I liked.
We added Laserdisc.
That's right.
So if it comes up, we'll be choosing a Laserdisc game from any system or genre to review.
All right, give her a whirl, dude.
You got a preference?
It's all good, man.
You know what? I'm hoping we get a little bit of fighting game action. I'm ready for fights.
Everything you ever hope for never happens, Harley. All right.
Thanks. Thanks for that.
Well, hey, listen. It's a harsh bit of reality. Here we go.
Come on, fight. Prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. Yeah!
Boy, why did I talk? Why did I say a word?
Oh, that was glorious. It hung on there.
So we're playing. So what are the rules of the fight?
Okay. Next week, we will be reviewing a game that is a fighting game. The definition of a fighting game is it has to be a one-on-one, two people fight until one person is left standing and the other is either knocked out or killed or whatever. So it's going to be a one-on-one fighting game next week. From any era, from any year.
Do you have any idea what you're going to pick?
Oh, man. Nope.
Well, there you go then. I'm looking to see if we got any reviews in this week on any these were tough to review because unless you have the Pinball Arcade and had bought it already, you couldn't play Brent's and you couldn't play mine at all. So hopefully we'll get some more reviews in next week. We didn't get jack squat this guy. I kind of figured we would.
Well, for this one coming up, man, any fighting game, it has to be a one-on-one fighting game.
Okay, that sounds great. So with that in mind, we thank you for tuning in to our Pinball of the late 90s. And please join us next week as we will be back, same bat time, same bat channel, and we will try to do better the next time. Until then, Pinball!